Text 24. Rajamargam Gate Krishna Dwarakaye Kulasriya Armayani Arurhur Vipra Tat Ikshana Mahat
When Lord Krishna passed over the public roads, all the ladies from the respectable families of Dwarka went up to the roofs of their palaces just to have a look at the Lord. They considered this to be the greatest festival.
Text 25. Nityam Nirikshamanam Yat Api Dwaraka Kankasham Navitravyanti Yai Tashaha Shetyodamagam Achyutam.
The inhabitants of Dwarka were regularly accustomed to look upon the reservoir of all beauty, the infallible Lord, yet they were never satiated.
Text 26. Shiyo Nivaso Yashyoraha Panapatram Mukham Dasham Bahavoloka Palanam Taranganam Padambujam.
The Lord's chest is the abode of the goddess of fortune. His moon-like face is a drinking vessel for eyes which hanker after all that is beautiful. His arms are the resting places for the administrative demigods, and his lotus feet are the refuge of pure devotees who never talk or sing of any subject except his lordship.
Text 27. Sita Patra Vyajanar Upashkritaha Prasanavasar Apivarsita Pati Visangavasa Vanamalaya Babu Gano Yad Artha Kodupa Chavedyuttaha.
As the Lord passed along the public road of Dwarka, his head was protected from the sunshine by a white umbrella. White feathered fans moved in semicircles, and showers of flowers fell upon the road. His yellow garments and garlands of flowers made it appear as if a dark cloud was surrounded simultaneously by sun, moon, lightning, and rainbows.
Text 28. Pravishtastu Graham Pitraha Parishvata Swamatrapi Pavande Sirasa Sapta Devaki Pramukha Muda.
After entering the house of his father, he was embraced by the mothers present, and the Lord offered his obeisances unto them by placing his head at their feet. The mothers were headed by Devaki, his real mother.
Text 29. Taputram Ankam Arupya Snehasnutta Payodaraha Harsha Vivalita Manaha Sisichu Netra Jalaha.
The mothers, after embracing their son, sat him on their laps. Due to pure affection, milk sprang from their breasts. They were overwhelmed with delight, and the tears from their eyes wetted the Lord.
Text 30. Athavisatsva bhavanam sarvakamam anuttamam prashadayatra patinanam sahasrani jasodasa.
Thereafter the Lord entered his palaces, which were perfect to the fullest extent. His wives lived in them, and they numbered over 16,000.
Text 31. पात्न्यापतिं प्रोष्य ग्रहुणपगातम् विलोक्य सञ्जता मनोमहत्स्वः उतस्तुरत्सहस्रनात्तयात् सकं वृत्ते वृदितलोचनः.
The queens of Lord Shri Krishna rejoiced within their minds to see their husband home after a long period abroad. The queens got up at once from their seats and meditations. As was socially customary, they covered their faces shyly and looked about coyly.
Text 32. Tam atmaje drishtabir Duranta bhava pariripir patim Niruttam api ashravat ambu netrayo Vilajatina brikuvarya vilaklavat.
The insuperable ecstasy was so strong that the queens, who were shy, first embraced the Lord in the innermost recesses of their hearts. Then they embraced him visually, and then they sent their sons to embrace him, which is equal to personal embracing. But, O chief amongst the burghers, though they tried to restrain their feelings, they inadvertently shed tears.
Text 33. Yadapi asu parvasha gato raho gatas Tathapi tashyangiri yugam navam Pada kavirameta tatpada Chalapi yakshina jahati karhichit.
Also, Lord Shri Krishna was constantly by their sides, as well as exclusively alone. His feet appeared to them to be newer and newer. The goddess of fortune, also by nature always restless and moving, could not quit the Lord's feet. So, what woman can be detached from those feet, having once taken shelter of them?
Text 34. Evam nirpanam shitibara janmanam Akshohina parivritta tejasam Vidaya veram swasano yatanalam Mito vedeno parato nirayuttaha.
The Lord was pacified after killing those kings who were burdensome to the earth. They were puffed up with their military strength, their horses, elephants, chariots, infantry, etc. He himself was not a party in the fight. He simply created hostility between the powerful administrators, and they fought amongst themselves. He was like the wind which causes friction between the bamboos and so sparks of a fire.
Text 35. Sa ishanaralokesmin avatirna swamayaya Remi ratnakutashto Bhagavan prakrito yatha.
That supreme personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, out of his causeless mercy, appeared on this planet by his internal potency and enjoyed himself amongst competent women as if he were engaging in mundane affairs.
Text 36. Uttama bhava pishnamala valguhasa Vrit Vrittavlokanihato matano peyasham Samuya chapam ajahat pramadottamasta Yashindriyam vimatitum kuha kena se kuha.
Although the queen's beautiful smiles and furtive glances were all spotless and exciting, and although they could conquer Cupid himself by making him give up his bow in frustration, and although even the tolerant Shiva could fall victim to them, still, despite all the magical feats and attractions, they could not agitate the senses of the Lord.
Text 37. Tam ayam manyate loko haya sangam api sankinam atma pamaye namanjuryam vyaprinvanam yato buddhaha.
The common materialistic conditioned souls speculate that the Lord is one of them. Out of the ignorance, they think that the Lord is affected by matter, although he is unattached.
Text 38. Etad ishanam ishashya prakriti stopi tad gunaha nayugyate sadatmaste yatha buddhistad ashraya.
This is the divinity of the personality of Godhead. He is not affected by the qualities of material nature, even though he is in contact with them. Similarly, the devotees who have taken shelter of the Lord do not become influenced by the material qualities.
Text 39. Tam vinir balamutta Srenam chanuvratam raha apramana vito pratur ishwaram matayo yatha.
The simple and delicate women truly thought that Lord Sri Krishna, their beloved husband, followed them and was dominated by them. They were unaware of the extent of the glories of their husband, as the atheists were unaware of him as a supreme controller.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Sorry for any mispronunciation.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much, Arsha Mataji. You did very well. Well done. And thank you, Uma Mataji. Your recitation of the translation was very nice also. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Sorry. Please forgive me for any mistake. Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. I didn't see any mistakes. Hare Krishna, dear devotees. Welcome to today's chat session. Seems like I've been a long time not in your association, so I'm very happy to be again. Today we continue reading and discussion of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 1, chapter number 11, entitled Lord Krishna's Entrance into Dwaraka. And today we'll be discussing text number 34 and 35. Every verse of this chapter is so beautiful, and it's such a privilege and honor that we all we have the opportunity to discuss, and we should be so grateful to Srila Prabhupada for making this beautiful knowledge accessible to us. And that's why before we discuss, we always say the Mangala Charanam prayers to invoke auspiciousness and also to express our gratitude to the spiritual master and predecessor Acharya. So please, you can join me in the recitation of the Mangala Charanam behind muted mics. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmalitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yatha Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gourange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Dishatarine Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So, just the context of this verse again. Let me just make sure that everyone's muted. So, in Krishna consciousness, there are two very heightened feelings. One is called separation, and the other one is union or meeting. And these two encounters invoke very intense feelings of love. So the previous chapter was about the feelings of separation, and we were all given entrance into the feelings of separation by the residents of Astinapur. And in this chapter, the contradictory feelings, the feelings of when there is meeting, is being discussed. And both are so relishable to experience and to hear about. So this particular section of the Bhagavatam, which is verses 30 to 35, is the dealings of the Lord with the queens. We've been discussing and reading how the Lord entered Dwaraka, and prior to that, he went to meet his mother and father, headed by Devaki and Vasudev. And after meeting his mother and father, the Lord then progresses to meet with the queens of Dwaraka. And all of these different rasas, Krishna is known as Rasaraj. He experiences all types of rasas, transcendental mellows with his devotees. And before this, we were discussing Vatsalya ras, the ras that comes from parental relationship. And now we move to the verses discussing conjugal ras, in a meeting between lovers and beloved. So we see the description of those feelings, and we'll discuss number 34 today. So I won't read the Sanskrit again because of time, or maybe I should. Evam nipanam sitibara janmanam aksho hinipi parivrit Tate Tejas Vasano Yatanalam Parato Nirayudaha. The Lord was pacified after killing those kings who were burdensome to the earth. They were puffed up with their military strength, their horses, elephants, chariots, infantry, etc. He himself was not party in the fight. He simply created hostility between the powerful administrators, and they fought among themselves. He was like the wind which causes friction between bamboos and so sparks a fire. Just interestingly, in the previous verse, we were discussing about, it describes the queens, their sentiments, how they were perceiving the Lord's lotus feet as newer and newer, and very loving emotions. And Lord Krishna was reciprocating with those emotions. And just to give us a heightened sense of what those emotions are like, we see there is some description in this verse of a conflicting emotion which is impeded. It almost seems like, we are discussing the emotions well, we are discussing the emotions of the queens, and then we get this verse about killing, the Lord killing. And one may wonder, why is this happening? Why is suddenly killing brought into it? The acharyas say that this verse about killing is brought in at this stage simply to give us a sense of the difference between unimpeded love and impeded love, or impeded reciprocation, which is through killing. So the purport by Srila Prabhupada is very interesting. We'll read it. I don't know why I'm getting all of these pop-ups come up. As stated above, the living entities are not factually enjoyers of things which are manifested as God's creation. The Lord is the genuine proprietor and enjoyer of everything manifested in his creation. Unfortunately, influenced by the deluding energy, the living being becomes a false enjoyer under the dictation of the modes of nature. Puffed up by such a false sense of becoming God, the deluded living being increases his material strength by so many activities and thus becomes the burden of the earth. So much so that the earth becomes completely uninhabitable by the sane. This state of affairs is called dharmasya glani, or misuse of the energy of the human being. When such misuse of human energy is prominent, the saner living beings become perturbed by the awkward situation created by the vicious administrators, who are simply burdens of the earth. And the Lord appears by his internal potency just to save the saner section of humanity and to alleviate the burden due to the earthly administrators in different parts of the world. He does not favor either of the unwanted administrators, but by his potential power, he creates hostility between such unwanted administrators as air creates fire in the forest by the friction of the bamboos. The fire in the forest takes place automatically by the force of the air, and similarly, the hostility between different groups of politicians take place by the unseen design of the Lord. And the unwanted administrators, puffed up by false power and military strength, thus become engaged in fighting among themselves over ideological conflicts, and so exhaust themselves of all powers. The history of the world reflects this factual will of the Lord. and it will continue to be enacted until the living beings are attached to the service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, this fact is very vividly described. It is said, "The deluding energy is my potency, and thus it is not possible for the dependent living beings to supersede the strength of the material modes. But those who take shelter in me, the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, can cross over the gigantic ocean of material energy." This means that no one can establish peace and prosperity in the world by fruitive activities or by speculative philosophy or ideology. The only way to surrender unto the Supreme Lord and thus become free from the illusion, the only way is to surrender unto the Supreme Lord and thus become free from the illusion of the deluding energy. Unfortunately, persons who are engaged in destructive work are unable to surrender to the personality of Godhead. They are all fools of the first order. They are the lowest of the human species of life. They are robbed of their knowledge, although apparently they seem to be academically educated. They are all of the demoniac mentality, always challenging the supreme power of the Lord. Those who are very materialistic, always anchoring after material power and strength, are undoubtedly fools of the first order, because they have no information of the living energy. And being ignorant of the supreme spiritual science, they are absorbed in material science, which ends with the end of the material body. They are the lowest of human beings because the human life is especially meant for re-establishing the lost relationship with the Lord, and they miss this opportunity of being engaged in material activities. They are robbed of their knowledge because even after prolonged speculation, they cannot reach the stage of knowing the personality of Godhead, summum bonum of everything. And all of them are men of demoniac principle, and they suffer the consequences, as did such materialistic heroes such as Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, Kamsa, and others. So, yes, it's like the Bhagavatam. A reader of the Bhagavatam, there are different people that read Bhagavatam. Some are devotees already, and they relish. And there are other people that maybe they're not so much on the path of devotion, but they have some inclination. So the last verse in this verse, it's like, as they say, it's chalk and cheese. One is describing the joy, the ecstasy, the bliss that comes from being in a loving relationship with the Lord. And this verse gives us the contrasting situation where one chooses to act in defiance of the Lord's will and the Lord's desires, and there is nothing but suffering. And yeah, it is explained that Krishna, he deals with such deviant living entities by his will. And Prabhupada gives, or this verse in the Bhagavatam gives a beautiful analogy between, like in the forest, there's the bamboos, and simply by friction between the bamboos, you get a spark of fire. And from that spark, a big fire emanates, and then the forest gets destroyed by the fire. So in the same way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, he deals with demoniac elements in the creation. And Prabhupada, in the purport, he talks about, the sane living entities and the insane. The sane living entities are those that, they obey the orders of the Lord, and they are essentially devotees. And the insane are deviant. So sometimes people ask, the question that, they are so burdensome leaders, so burdensome entities on this planet. The Lord says, Dharmasya Glani, that he would advent and destroy these unwanted elements. And some people ask, so why doesn't he appear and do that? And the answer is given in this verse, that Krishna, he does not have to personally appear. Simply by his energy, simply by his will, he can destroy all of these unwanted elements, and he creates friction. And we see this in the Bhagavatam when Krishna wanted to wind up his pastimes among the Yadus. It's clearly explained that he created some friction for the purposes of winding up his pastime with his devotees. And in the same way, Krishna can create friction to eliminate unwanted elements. And the Lord can do that. That's his potency. That's his potency. So let's move on to the next verse, because it's a very, very beautiful verse and purport. So text number 35. Sae Shanaro Loke Asmin. No, this is the wrong meter. Atina Swa Sae Kanaro Lokesmin Avatirna Swamayaya Reme Shri Ratna Kutusto Bhagavan Prakrito Yata. So translation, that Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, out of his causeless mercy appeared on this planet by his internal potency and enjoyed himself among competent women as if they were engaging in mundane affairs. It's a long purport. Sorry, I'm just losing myself now. The Lord married and lived like a householder. This is certainly like a mundane affair. But when we learn that he married 16,108 wives and lived with them separately in each and every palace, certainly is not mundane. Therefore, the Lord living as a householder among his competent wives is never mundane, and his behavior with them is never to be understood as mundane sex relation. The women who became the wives of the Lord are certainly not ordinary women, because to get the Lord as one's husband is the result of many, many millions of births, tapasya, austerity. When the Lord appeared on different lokas or planets, or on this planet of human beings, he displays his transcendental pastimes just to attract the conditioned souls to become his eternal servitors, friends, parents, and lovers, respectively, in the transcendental world, where the Lord eternally reciprocates with such exchanges of service. Service is pervertedly represented in the material world and broken untimely, resulting in sad experience. The illusioned living being conditioned by material nature cannot understand out of ignorance that all our relations here in the mundane world are temporary and full of inebrities. Such relations cannot help us be happy perpetually. But if the same relation is established with the Lord, Then we are transferred to the transcendental world after leaving this material body and become eternally related with him in the relation we desire. The woman amongst whom he lived as their husband are not therefore women of this mundane world, but they are eternally related with him as transcendental wives, a position which they attained by perfection of devotional service. That is their competency. The Lord is Param Brahma, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Conditioned souls seek after perpetual happiness in all places, not only on this earth, but also on other planets throughout the universe. Because constitutionally, a spiritual spark, as he is, can travel to any part of God's creation. But being conditioned by the material modes, he tries to travel in space by spacecraft and so fails to reach his destination. The law of gravitation is binding upon him like the shackles of a prisoner. By other processes, he can reach anywhere. But even if he reaches the highest planet, he cannot attain that perpetual happiness for which he is searching life after life. When he comes to his senses, however, he seeks after Brahman happiness, knowing it for certain that unlimited happiness which he is seeking is never attainable in the material world. As such, the Supreme Being, Para, Brahman, certainly does not seek his happiness anywhere in the material world. Nor can his paraphernalia of happiness be found in the material world. He is not impersonal. He is the leader and supreme being among innumerable living beings. He cannot be impersonal. He is exactly like us, and he has all the propensities of an individual living being in fullness. He marries exactly like us, but his marriage is never mundane, nor limited by our experience in the conditioned state. His wives, therefore, appear like mundane women, but factually they are all transcendental, liberated souls, perfect manifestations of internal energy. What an amazing purport by Srila Prabhupada, explaining so many wonderful aspects of this verse. And, there are some standout themes. So, as I was explaining, there are different people who may hear Bhagavatam or read Bhagavatam. And there are many people who, when they read Bhagavatam, they may relate what they're reading according to their own mundane experience. Prabhupada gave the story that once there was a cow in a barn, and one day the barn caught on fire. And it was a very, very traumatic situation for the cow. The cow, fortunately, was able to get released. But every time thereafter, whenever the cow would see red, the cow would remember fire, and the cow would become very traumatized. So Prabhupada says, in the same way, when we hear about the Lord's relationship with the wives or his queens in Dwaraka, one may relate it to one's own mundane experience in life. Oh, Krishna is married. Immediately we project our experience of marriage on Krishna's marriage. That is mundane. But it is, as Prabhupada explained, it's a completely different experience. And firstly, Prabhupada talks about these wives of Krishna. Firstly, this relationship is not mundane. And firstly, the wives themselves they are competent women. This verse Prabhupada translates, he enjoyed himself among competent women. Now, a gross materialist may have a certain understanding of what a competent woman means in terms of maybe physical appearance, in terms of their ability to satisfy his senses. But here Prabhupada explains that these women, these wives, they are not ordinary women. These women, they were able to get Krishna as their husband after many, many millions of births. Many, many millions of births. Initially, Prabhupada talks about tapasya, and it would apparently seem that one may be able to get Krishna as one's husband through tapasya, through austerity. But as we read, from the Bhagavatam, there's one verse in the 11th canto where Krishna says, "Na dhanam, na tapasya," not by austerity can I be achieved. So Prabhupada really speaks about that after tapasya, they became devotees. They became devotees. And after intense devotion, they were able to get the Lord as their husband. And then Prabhupada gives a big explanation about this verse about mundane affairs. That it would appear that Krishna is engaging in mundane affairs. Normally in this material world, the affairs of marriage are considered to be mundane, because marriage is generally there as a facility for a level of sense gratification in the conditioned state. So one may think that Krishna is also wanting to engage in sense gratification. And that's why Prabhupada clarifies in the verse that Lord Krishna, he's not after sense gratification. And the way Prabhupada actually draws us to this understanding is very interesting in the purport. Prabhupada first talks about the mundane person who, through experience in the material world, gives up material life and tries to pursue a life of transcendence, and engages in transcendental activity. So Prabhupada says Krishna, he explains that the material world is a place of suffering, and all activities are suffering, and all activities under the material modes. So why would Krishna, having spoken like this and having led the fallen living entities to seek Brahman happiness, why would he want to engage in any mundane relationship? So this is proof that this relationship with Krishna's wives being described in this purport, it's not mundane, it's transcendental. And it's really interesting to read and to see how Srila Prabhupada brings it down, this understanding of what's being described in this verse, brings it down to even an elementary person can understand. An elementary person, just through simple, plain, logical analysis, that we can understand that this relationship between Krishna and his wives being described here is far, far, far from being mundane. It's a transcendental activity. Krishna is transcendental. The woman that he is reciprocating in these verses, they are also transcendental living entities. He's devotees. And we should understand it like that. And then the next verse will We'll explain that in more detail. Because it begs the question, if it was mundane, why would Shukdev Goswami, who is a liberated soul, why would all of the sages assembled wanting to hear Shukadev speak to Parikshit, why would they want to hear about mundane marriage dealings? No, these dealings of the Lord and his queens are purifying, very, very purifying. Okay, it's just after 8:08. I think we normally stop here and then take questions, comments, reflections. So I'll also stop here and take any questions or reflections that anyone may have. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam Prabhu.
Thank you very much for a beautiful class as always. Thank you. Just worth clarifying or pointing out, Prabhu, you might want to expand a little bit on this, that of course not all of Krishna's wives, the principal queens, are not devotees, but they're his eternal associates. They've not achieved that through tapasya. They're there because they're expansions of Radharani and Lakshmi, principal queens. So they're not through tapasya, but they're eternal associates. So there's different categories of wives that Krishna has here, of course. Many are sages that have done tapasya, that have got that position through, as you say, many lives of tapasya. But many are also expansions of Radharani and Lakshmi. Lakshmi is also Radharani's expansion. So it's different categories of wives involved here, and different relationships involved.
Very nice point. Very nice point. Thank you for raising that, Prabhu.
And interestingly, I was listening to a lecture by Prabhupada today. It was really fascinating. He was quite critical of, for instance, Mahatma Gandhi's Ahimsa movement. And, we come on to this here where the Lord effectively creates friction between leaders in order to annihilate or to and he was very against. He said you can't run the country on the basis of ahimsa alone, how violence is required, and how Krishna was scolding Arjun, saying you're a fool for thinking that non-violence by giving up the fight is going to solve problems. So it was really a nice correlation to today's class to what Prabhupada was saying about Mahatma Gandhi. Of course, quite controversial what he says, and in terms of Indian patriots, but very absolutely true, of course. So thank you. Wonderful class.
Yeah, thank you. Well, that's also another very important point. Yeah, Prabhupada doesn't mince his word. Yeah.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. Vrindavan Chandra Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances.
Yeah, accept mine. Krishna Vani Mataji.
Prabhu, like this queens of Krishna, they just question raises in my mind that, okay, when Krishna was there, and they were all the special devotees, and like Prabhu said, they are the incarnations of expansions of Radharani. But, when Krishna leaves this planet, and some of the queens are still on this material planet, and Arjun is escorting them. He was bringing them to the safe place, right? And at that time, Arjun could not defend, and even these, ladies and queens, they were special souls, but still, they could not even, they gone through that kind of, what you call abduction or whatever, those from simple cowherd boys, they got defeated. So how can you explain that, Prabhu? Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Generally, the explanation is understood from the perspective of Leela. Who were those coward men? Were they ordinary cowherd men, or they were either expansions of Krishna or personalities. But the general principle is that Krishna always is protective of his devotees. The devotees are always under his shelter. So under such situations, externally it may seem contradictory, it may seem bewildering. But when we see everything actually as the will of Krishna,
Yeah.
everything in relation to his devotees is some sort of plan by Krishna, then we can just say, oh, must be some plan of Krishna. We pray to Krishna to understand maybe how that plan works. Yeah, we see it like that.
I think maybe Krishna wanted to show that, when he leaves, then all his devotees and everybody are losing their, what you call strength and everything. So
yeah, that could be part of the reason. Arjuna, that point is made very, very clear by Arjuna.
Yeah.
Once Krishna left, he was not the same Arjuna. He was bereft of who he was before.
Yes.
So Krishna, the Lord, he achieves many purposes in one. So the Bhagavatam wanted to highlight this point about how everything is by Krishna's mercy. So that's some Leela.
Yeah, I think that is kind of it's Krishna's play, right?
Yes.
And to teach us, the mundane people. And by, it's like a play, and there is like conflict and, like love scenes and all these things to attract the ordinary people to maybe read and listen and watch his Leela and plays, which can, like enlighten the ordinary people.
Yeah, Prabhupada makes that point very clearly in the purport. All of this is to attract us. And therefore it's so important to hear from a devotee. A pure devotee understands the plan of Krishna, and the pure devotee can explain all of this Leela and the pastimes of the Lord that enhances our attraction for Krishna. But a non-devotee will not be able to understand this Leela of Krishna. Like a Mayavadi. A Mayavadi who's reading these pastimes about Krishna, who thinks that Krishna, who is being spoken about here, is in a material body, has taken on a material body, they will think it's mundane.
Yeah.
They will think it's mundane. So Srila Prabhupada's purports are just such a gift to this world. It's such a gift to this world because Prabhupada goes to many lengths and great depth, even bringing it down to our level in the purport to make us understand why it's not mundane. So even an ordinary person who reads these verses, normally we hear that Bhagavatam is the postgraduate study of Vedic science, but even a person who's not qualified can hear that. Thank you.
Shows, like it's a proof in the pudding, like, all this, with all the, all the devotees who are selling, and yourself as well, all these sets of Bhagavatam. But not all the devotees are only, purchasing the Bhagavatam, but even the ordinary people, some pious people are, and then after reading, they becoming devotees and they're coming closer to Krishna. So it shows that, like they are not ordinary. And Krishna Srila Prabhupada was always telling that I have not translated, Krishna was dictating. And all Srila Prabhupada's books, by reading, so many people are becoming devotees. It shows all these mundane and so many other translation and Srila Prabhupada. That is very totally opposite.
Very much so. Thank you. Thank you for that, Krishnavani. Indulekha Mataji, you've raised your hand.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Hare Krishna everyone. Kindly accept my humble obeisances. So we see his purport, Srila Prabhupada explained what happened to the wives of Lord Krishna. We see that he said that they were not ordinary people, they were fair denizens of the higher planetary system. And there was Astavakra Muni, who was like crooked in 8 places in his body, 8 joints. And these Vedianism, they prayed to that Muni. So they got the boon that they are going to marry the Lord. They're going to get the Lord as their husband. But at some point, because Astavakra Muni was walking in a particular way, they couldn't check their laughing. So they laughed. And the Muni got very angry and he cursed them. He said, you will be abducted by rogues. And then they prayed to him again. And then he said, okay, even if you become the wife of the Lord, you will be abducted by the rogues, and then you will be saved again. And here, just to keep the word of his devotee, Lord Krishna, he himself abducted all the wives when Arjuna was taking them to Hastinapur. He himself did that. And then by his mercy, each of them returned to the original position at due time. So that was Krishna's Leela also. Hare Krishna, Babaji.
Thank you so much, Indulekha Mataji, for giving us that background. It's
it's in the purport of
Wait, this oh, the one in when that pastime is being described.
Yes. Yeah. When Arjuna was returning,
I think it's later on in the Bhagavatam. It's
I think it's chapter 15, Prabhuji. Chapter 15.
Yeah, I'm just having a look. Yeah. So 14 or 15. Yeah. The Pandavas retire timely.
Yeah. In that one, you will get this pastime.
Okay, thank you for reminding us. Very nice. Again, it's the Lord's plan. Lord is achieving so many purposes in one. So many purposes. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Anyone else has got any reflections, comments, or questions? Let me see if there's anything on the chat box. Okay, thank you, Surya Prabhu. Okay, if there's nothing else, thank you very much for your attendance, your questions, your participation. Glories to your service, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha.
Thank you very much for nice. Thank you,
Hare
Prabhuji.
Krishna. Thank you,
Wonderful
Prabhuji.
class. Thank you. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna, Hare Krishna, Prabhu.